I want to talk to you about the grief process in divorce. So divorce is one of the most painful things that you can go through because it is literally like having gangrene in your arm. And you look at it and you're like, my arm's black. It's ugly. It's the doctor says it's not going to heal. We're going to have to amputate your arm. And you don't want to have your arm cut off. You don't want it. Even if you want the divorce, even if you know that it's a bad marriage, it's an unhealthy marriage, most of the time it's still very difficult to go through the loss of the things that are associated with that marriage. So it's like cutting off that arm and then learning to live without that arm. And so at first you're struggling over having that arm cut off, and then you go through that, and then you're struggling with the anger and the pain of the surgery, and then the pain of trying to accept it, and then you have the phantom limb for a while, and then you end up learning how to live without that arm. And you move on and you get over, you've grieved the loss of that arm and you've accepted that you don't have that arm anymore. It's gone. So that's kind of what happens in the divorce process. The first stage is denial shock. And if it's somebody that hands you divorce papers that you didn't expect, it's really a denial shock. Like, oh, I can't believe this is happening to me. If it's a mutual decision that you're going to divorce because the marriage is bad and you know you can't continue, it's still painful to make that final decision and to have that final, like, yes, it has to be over. So it's working through the shock of, I have to deal with this, I have to go through this, and I can't deny this anymore. And it is what it is. So that is the first stage. Then you go through the anger. And the anger is where you are just furious. It's where you feel the anger toward your spouse. You feel the anger toward yourself for the mistakes you made. Anger maybe towards God, like you believed God was going to fix this. God promised to work everything out and to answer your prayers. And you prayed for this marriage to be healed. And you believed God and you trusted God for it to be healed. And now it's not healed. So you're angry. You're really angry. You can feel the anger. Maybe you just are so furious you can't talk to your spouse. You can't have conversations. You just want to fight. You want to explain. You want to try to make sure that your spouse knows everything that you're feeling and thinking and everything that you want to blame for. You could just be super mad at yourself for the things that you didn't do that you now know you should have done and that you really, really regret. So the anger is going to, and then it could go towards other people, maybe a spouse or an in-law that enabled your spouse or sided with them, or friends that have sided with your spouse, or maybe your spouse had an affair, so you're angry with the person that they've had the affair with. So whoever else was involved that you may have intense anger towards, and you got to work through that stage, and it doesn't feel nice and it doesn't feel Christian, but it is okay and it is necessary, and it's a part of literally coming to terms with this. You have to come to terms with it. You have to grieve the loss. It has to be done with all the parts, and you go through them, and then you might flip back. You might go back to denial for a little while. Might go back to anger after you've gotten out of it. The third stage is bargaining. And bargaining is part of the subconscious, unconscious mind coming to terms with the fact that it really is. So the bargaining is, what if I had changed this earlier, then we wouldn't be divorcing? What if God had fixed this? What if my spouse hadn't gotten that job where my partner met this person that they're now going to continue with and has caused our divorce, having an affair? What if we didn't have the child that had the disability that put so much strain on our marriage? So it's whatever. And it's all of these things trying to figure out, What if something hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have to be here. I wouldn't have to be dealing with this. I wouldn't have to be going through this divorce. And that's part of what you have to do, because when you exhaust all the what ifs, at the end, you say to yourself, none of those happened. It's real. I have to deal with this divorce. Okay. All the what ifs are useless. So the next one is the sadness. And this is what people think is grief, only the sadness, but this is actually the fourth stage, and where you feel the loss. This is where you feel hopeless, where you feel sad, you feel heavy, you feel the mourning. This is where you maybe can't get out of bed, you can't go to work, you can barely function. You feel like you can't survive this, you'll never be the same. You might find yourself crying all the time. Or you might find yourself just devastated and sad and depressed and feeling absolutely like, nope, I'm never going to be okay. You got to go through this. And then the next and final stage, and the whole purpose of going through the grief process, is acceptance. You accept, finally, it is what it is. The marriage is over. It happened. We all did what we did. Can't go back and change it. We're not perfect. I did the best I could at the time. That's all I knew. It's accepting. It's done. I can't fix it. I have to move forward. Acceptance is literally putting out your hand and taking what is offered. When you're not accepting, you're refusing. I'm not divorcing. I'm not going to admit this. I'm not going to. Nope. It's okay. I'm going to be divorced. This marriage is over. I'm not going to resist. I'm not going to fight. Now, take care of yourself. If you can, get a mediator so it doesn't cost so much money with opposing attorneys. If you've got somebody that will work with you. If you can't, you have rights. You have a right to most likely, usually half of all the assets. And so make sure that you protect yourself. If you are hoping and praying and believing that God's going to save your marriage and is going to reconcile it and put it back together, that's fine. I tell people, pray, hope, believe, but do everything as if it isn't going to happen, because if you are not participating in the legal process, you don't fill out the proper paperwork, you don't respond within the legal amount of time in your state or your country, then you can lose your rights and you can end up losing a lot with your children's custody and assets. So you must do everything as if the divorce is going to happen. If God's going to fix it and your spouse is going to come back to you and everything's going to be fine, it's not going to matter that you responded to the divorce and that your spouse is going to be able to accept that and accept the fact that you got an attorney, just like they're going to accept everything else and forgive and put things back together. So make sure that you still move forward, allow yourself to go through the grief process so that you're not stuck and so that you're not doing things that are not protecting yourself. So when you go through acceptance, that's when you can begin to put the divorce behind you and move forward and start your new life and accept that you are going to have life after divorce. So Psalm 23 talks about going through something very difficult. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley of divorce, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. There is life after divorce.